All right, we are going to start the second part of 9.1, which is adding polynomials. We talked about polynomials are basically terms. A monomial is one term, and if there's more than one, we could just call it a polynomial. There's binomials, trinomials, but in this case, we're just going to call them polynomials. All right, so with adding polynomials, we are basically just going to line up the like terms. And now like terms have the same variables to the same exponent. And once they are lined up, all we have to do is add and combine them together. I'm going to line them up in standard form, which means the highest exponent first, all the way down to our constant, which is our number without anything. So if I look at this, I'm going to break these down. I'm going to just space out these first ones. So I'm going to write 2p to the third. This is a 6p squared, 6p squared, and it's a positive. And then we have 10p. And then in this one, because we're adding, I'm just going to line up the ones underneath that are the like terms. So 9p to the third would go here. 11p squared will go with that one. And a 3p will go with that one. So now we're basically just adding all of the like terms. So these are all positives. So 2 plus 9 would be 11, p to the third. 6 and 11 would be 17, so I'm going to indicate a positive 17, p squared. 10 and a 3 would be a positive 13p. And then this is my answer already written in standard form. All right, we're going to do that over here. Now, if you notice, this first term has a cubed and a squared. This one has a cubed and a whole number, so we're not going to have, all of them are not going to be like terms, but we're going to see how I write these out. So I'm going to write a 9w to the third. I'm going to space this one out. I have it 8w squared. Over here I have a 7w to the third. Over here I have a 4, so I'm just going to write that off to the side. I'm not going to line it up with the squared because we're not going to combine them because they're not like terms. Now that I have these lined up, I can combine them, so I can do 7 plus 9, because they're both positives, so that would be 16w to the third. There's nothing that combines with the 8w squared, so I'll just write that as a positive 8w squared. Remember, when we scrunch them closer together, we have to indicate their value. And this is a positive 4, so I'll write the positive 4 next to that. And that would be our second term, or our second answer to adding these two polynomials. Okay. Now when we get into subtracting polynomials, and so anyway, let me go back to the adding ones. So when we're doing these, I would space these out and then line up the ones that are like terms afterwards, because there might be 3 or 4, and we'll do some other examples later with maybe have 3 or 4, but as long as you're lining up the ones that are alike and then adding them together, whether they be positives or negatives. If they're negatives, you can add the negative or subtract them. Then you're getting an answer in that format. All right, so subtracting polynomials. All right, so we're going to line them up just like we did before. And then for our second step, when we line up the second ones, we're going to distribute the negative. So in a sense, all we're going to do is change the sign of each of the terms in the second polynomial. So for this one, we have a negative out here, we have a positive x to the third, a negative 8x squared, and a positive 11. When we rewrite it, this would be a negative x to the third, this would be a positive 8x squared, and this would be a negative 11, kind of like we did over here, how we changed all the signs. And then we're going to line them up and we're going to add all the like terms together. So that's the key with subtracting them. Let me go ahead and scroll down on the notes. So if I'm going to line these up, I'm going to start here. I'm going to write out v to the third. Remember, the first ones don't change at all. I'm going to write a 6v squared. That's a positive. And over here, I'm going to write a negative v. Remember, that's a negative 1v. If there's no number with it, we assume it's a 1. All right, so for the second one, now I'm going to write the opposite of each one and line up my like terms. Just like, also let me note this is a negative 1 to the third as well. So when I am over here, this would be a negative 9v to the third. All right, over here, this is a negative 7v squared, but since we're distributing that negative, that's going to become a positive 7v squared. And then for our positive 3v on the last one, right here, I'm going to make that a negative 3v. And now they're all kind of lined up, so we can add them together. So 1 minus a 9. Now remember, if you're either going to do a 1 plus a negative 9 or 1 minus a 9. So double check in your calculators to make sure we get the correct answer. So that's going to be a negative 8v to the third. Here we have two positives, so we're just going to add those. 6 plus 7. It's going to be a positive 13v squared, and negative 1 and a negative 3 would give us a negative 4v, and that would be our final answer. All right, looking over at this one, I'm going to do the exact same thing. The first ones don't change. All right, so this would be, I'm going to give myself some space, and I'll change colors here. So 30x to the third, negative 29x squared, negative 3x. And in the second one, they are all going to change signs. So this positive 2x to the third will become a negative 2x to the third. And I'm going to line that up with the like term. So negative 2x to the third. And then my x squared will line up here. This is going to become a negative x. And remember, if there's no number, it's a 1. So that's all we have there. So now we will actually do the math. 30 take away 2, or 30 plus a negative 2. It's the same thing. That'll be 28x to the third. Negative 29 minus 1. Now be careful with your negatives. So if you're going to add those, remember it's 29 negative plus a negative 1, or just minus 1, which would give us a negative 30x squared. And then there's nothing to combine that with, so we'll just leave that as a negative 3x. Oops, and there's nothing there. So that is how you add or subtract polynomials. We're going to line that up. So we got a few seconds, so I'm going to do a couple sample problems over here. So let's just, maybe we'll mix it up a little bit. So I'll have 2x to the third minus 4x squared plus 5. We're going to add that to, let's say, 9x squared minus 4x plus 3. All right, so I'm going to rewrite these first ones. If you want to pause this and try it and then check your answers afterwards. 2x to the third, and remember with addition, we're not changing the signs. We're just lining them up and combining like terms. All right, I have a negative 4x squared. I would have what would be an x term, so I'm going to space it out even more. I'm going to put a positive 5 here. And now for the second one, I have a 9x squared, so I'm going to line that up with the negative 4x squared. So that would be a 9x squared. I have a negative 4x, negative 4x, and then I have a positive 3, so I'll line that up with the 5. Now, all we have to do is add the like terms, and the way that I line them up is going to already put them in standard form, so we're good there. There's no other x to the third, so I'm just going to write down 2x to the third. I have a negative 4 plus 9. Again, when we use these negatives, make sure you're confident in them, but double check. So negative 4 plus 9, that's going to give us a 5. So it would be a positive 5x squared. And again, because I'm writing it next to this, I'm indicating the value. Nothing to add with the negative 4x, so I'm just going to write that down, negative 4x. And then we have a 5 and a 3. So they're both positives, so that's going to be a positive 8. And that would be an example of adding polynomials with multiple terms. Now let's do a subtraction example. So maybe in the back of your notes, write this problem down. Let's make it tricky. So let's do 7x to the fourth minus 3x squared plus 10x minus 5. And we will subtract from that. Let's do 10x to the third minus 2x squared plus 5x minus 7. Uh-oh. 4 terms in each of these polynomials. But the skill or the steps remain the same. So I'm going to write down the first one. All right, so I'm going to write 7x to the fourth. I'm going to give myself some space. So there is no x to the third here, so I'm going to give a little bit more space. And I'm going to write a negative 3x squared. Then I can write a 10x. And then I'll write a negative 5. All right, so underneath, for this second term, I'll change colors just so we can see. Remember, since we're subtracting, I'm going to take the opposite of each one. So this positive 10x to the third becomes a negative 10x to the third. Because there's no 10x to the third, I'm just going to line it up here. So it would be a negative 10x to the third. This negative 2x squared is becoming a positive because it's the opposite. So I'm going to write a positive 2x squared. All right, this positive 5x becomes a negative 5x. And notice that I'm lining it up with the other terms that are alike. And this negative 7 becomes a positive 7. All right, so now all we have to do is combine all the like terms. All right, so in this example, there is no other x to the fourth, so 7x to the fourth would be that one. There's no other x to the third, so I'm just going to write the negative 10x to the third down. There's a negative 3 plus 2. Again, be careful with your negative signs. So negative 3 plus 2, that gives us a negative 1. Negative 1x squared. 10 and a negative 5. So 10 minus 5, that would give us a positive 5x. Negative 5 plus 7. All right, use your calculators, use your tools just to double check, but that's going to give us a positive 2. And that would be our final answer. All the like terms are collected, and we distribute that negative through by taking the opposite sign.